Raiding is one of my favorite parts of playing an MMORPG. There's something so satisfying about getting together with a group of your friends and killing internet dragons. Trying to compare raiding between FF14 and WoW is actually very difficult, despite how similar the games are. So when I saw a podcast called the MOG Podcast, where world-first raiders from both games were having a discussion on just that, I knew I had to listen. So, without further rambling, here are my thoughts on raiding: WoW versus Final Fantasy XIV. In case it wasn't obvious, I was never in a world-first race. My experience with raiding a WoW is, I've cleared Heroic 25 tiers before the next tier, and Mythic tiers in time for Cutting Edge. Cutting Edge means the final boss of the tier was killed before the next tier. In terms of guild rank, I was in a top 25 guild for a short bit, but most of my time was in a guild ranked about 80. For Final Fantasy XIV, I have much less experience, but I've cleared some extremes and some savages. So one of the things that was discussed in the podcast that piqued my interest was how differently the developers design their fights. For this, I am talking about the tuning and not the mechanics. It's been said that the raid designers for WoW tune their fights by cranking the dial to 11, and that they make them so hard that the developers themselves cannot defeat them. I have no idea if that is actually true. It floated around a lot during my time in WoW, but it seems true, which isn't a great look. There have been several encounters that had to be changed due to tuning. You could say that the developers are a bit tone deaf. Moreover, in World of Warcraft, the developers do hard nerfs throughout the tier. No, that does not mean they make the fights harder by nerfing those that can kill it. A hard nerf is when they lower attributes in raid encounters, such as HP, damage, frequency of certain attacks, and so forth. Conversely, a soft nerf could be a fight becoming easier due to obtaining higher item levels. In the podcast, it was stated that Final Fantasy XIV has not had to do hard nerfing since Heaven's Ward. That expansion came out 6 years ago, and since then, Square Enix have mastered their craft and have been able to put out challenging fights that have not needed to be tuned. It has been stated that the developers make sure the fights can be cleared with normal party compositions. What that means is a party consisting of 2 tanks, 2 healers, 2 physical DPS, and 2 magical DPS. And each of those roles are filled by different jobs. So yeah, the fights are killed before being released, and the developers know they are killable, so they don't need tuning later on. Why does this matter? Well, it matters because in WoW, you can never experience a fight the way a world-first raider did. By the time most guilds get to the later encounters, they have been hard nerfed multiple times. Even if you were to make sure your gear was at the exact same item level, and you went in blind, it wouldn't matter because it's not the same fight. In Final Fantasy XIV, you can do just that. You can go to the cog in the upper left-hand corner of the duty finder, click on minimum item level, click echo off, and then you can blind progress. See how long it takes you to win. Maybe you do it faster than the world first teams, and you can come away with the knowledge that, if you were in the race, you'd have won. That is cool, and that is something you can't do in WoW. So, my takeaway from this is that WoW designs its fights as blocks for the world-first raiders, and then hard nerfs them. Final Fantasy XIV designs its fights to be a balanced challenge. Personally, I've never gotten much joy from beating something that is BS difficult, where it took unreasonable amount of time to succeed. If anything, I felt relieved it's over and frustrated at all the time it took. But maybe world-first raiders really like that sort of thing. Either way, I think it's stupid that WoW is designed to be hard nerfed throughout the tier. You know what it is? Planned obsolescence. It's Blizzard's mantra, as well as Apple's. Make everything obsolete as time goes on. Another topic brought up was raid size. In WoW, Mythic raids require 20 people. In FF14, raiding requires 8, unless you count Alliance raids and other special raids. There was a time when 10-man raiding was a thing in WoW, and it was unfortunate that Blizzard could never get the balance correct. Running theme, right? I used to be in camp bigger raid size, but now that I've experienced what can be done when raid designers balance around smaller raid sizes, I vastly prefer it. It's easier to get 8 people with like-minded goals together. They can design mechanics so that everyone has important roles to do, and generally speaking, I find it more enjoyable. Also, another bonus, it's easier to put together groups in the party finder when you only need to find 7 other people instead of 19. However, there is something to be said about how epic a bigger raider size feels. It is really cool seeing a bunch of players fighting a boss, but in terms of what I find more fun, smaller is better in this case. It's not the size of the raid, it's what you do with it. The last topic that caught my ear was the difference in barrier to entry for World First raiding. If you want to push for a high ranking in the race, the barrier to entry will be steep regardless of the game. The big difference between WoW and 14 in this regard, a lot of time in 14 is put in during the race, and the race in 14 is also shorter. In WoW, you need to put in a lot of time into preparing for the race, and then you also have to commit 2+ weeks for the race itself, where you will be expected to raid every day for extended periods of time. Essentially, if you want to compete in WoW, you need to make raiding your job. In 14, that is seemingly not the case. Because the race is so short, it's not as big of a burden to find the time to compete. With that being said, the 14 players in the podcast said they put in 20 hours in the first night. Pump that caffeine straight into the vein because I have no idea how else you could manage that. Let's talk add-ons and their role in raiding. The developers for WoW have been on record saying they designed their fights with add-ons in mind. They literally named a boss in a raid after one, that boss being Lotheb, which is an anagram for Healbot, which was a very popular healing add-on. Since the developers designed the fights with them in mind, they become necessary. It's a vicious circle of Blizzard's own design. Final Fantasy XIV has no official support for add-ons, though they do exist. The big difference is Final Fantasy XIV does not design its fight encounters with them in mind. I think that makes the fights more enjoyable to progress on. The developers need to be more clever with how abilities are presented and telegraphed, since they aren't designing the fights with the crux of an add-on as an excuse for vague mechanics. So WoW vs Final Fantasy XIV, raiding. I already knew I preferred 14, I felt the aesthetics of the encounters were better, and I enjoyed how cinematic they felt. After hearing this podcast, I grew to appreciate the raids in 14 even more, and you don't need to be a World First Raider to find that appreciation. With that being said, which do you prefer, raiding in WoW or Final Fantasy XIV? Thanks for listening, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and have a great day!